Welcome to another video with Eat the Fruit. Today we're diving into a fascinating comparison between two ancient creation stories, the biblical account in Genesis and a Neo-Sumerian text known as the Founding of Eridu. This Neo-Sumerian text, translated by Stephen Langdon in 1917, offers a detailed narrative of creation that shares many similarities with the story of Genesis. Our goal today is to explore how these two ancient texts relate to each other and what that means for our understanding of creation myths. Let's start with the Neo-Sumerian account. The text begins by acknowledging a time before creation, much like in Genesis. It describes a world where civilization hadn't yet been established, where all the lands were covered by sea. This image of a world submerged in water is a common theme in many ancient cultures, symbolizing chaos and the unknown. In Genesis, the earth is described as formless and empty, with darkness over the surface of the deep. This deep, chaotic water represents the untamed, unformed state of the world before creation. The Neo-Sumerian text then introduces Lugal-Dukuga, who is credited with establishing Eridu. Eridu is widely accepted to be the biblical Eden, the first city and a center of civilization. In the Neo-Sumerian view, Eridu wasn't just a physical place. It was also seen as the birthplace of culture, order, and the relationship between gods and humans. This mirrors the role of Eden in Genesis, where the garden represents not just a physical location but also the beginning of humanity's relationship with God. In both stories, this marks the start of the creation narrative, where the world begins to take shape. Next, we encounter Marduk, the great god of the Babylonians, who is described as floating above the waters of the deep. This image is strikingly similar to the depiction of God in Genesis, who hovers over the waters at the beginning of creation. Both stories emphasize the presence of a divine figure above the primordial waters, ready to bring order out of chaos. Marduk, in the Babylonian tradition, is seen as the hero who brings light and order to the world, just as God does in Genesis by commanding, "Let there be light." This act of hovering or floating over the waters symbolizes the divine intention to bring structure and life to an otherwise chaotic and lifeless world. The Neo-Sumerian text goes on to describe the creation of man, trees, and animals, paralleling the Genesis account where God creates vegetation, animals, and finally, mankind. Marduk's actions in the Neo-Sumerian story are almost identical to those of God in Genesis, underscoring the shared themes between these two creation myths. For instance, when Marduk creates the animals and plants, it echoes the days of creation in Genesis, where God brings forth every living creature and plant according to their kinds. One of the most interesting elements in the Neo-Sumerian account is the creation of a dam by Marduk, which causes the marshes to dry and results in the formation of new land. This is quite similar to the firmament in Genesis, which separates the waters above from the waters below, creating space for dry land to appear. The Neo-Sumerian dam and the biblical firmament both serve to establish the earth as a place where life can thrive. In Genesis, the firmament plays a crucial role in organizing the world, while in the Neo-Sumerian text, the dam directly leads to the creation of habitable land. Both are essential steps in transforming the chaotic waters into a structured, life-sustaining environment. Some scholars suggest that the biblical creation story in Genesis might actually be a later, allegorized retelling of the events described in the Neo-Sumerian text. The Neo-Sumerian story portrays Marduk as a divine figure performing these tasks, but what if these tasks were originally carried out by a prehistoric king? A king whose actions were so monumental that they were later mythologized into the story of Marduk. This idea raises the possibility that the Genesis creation account could be based on a corrupted or altered version of this much earlier historical event. This perspective invites us to reconsider the origins of these stories. Instead of seeing them as entirely separate or independent, we might view them as interconnected, with the biblical narrative possibly drawing from or being influenced by the older Neo-Sumerian account. It's a mic drop moment that challenges us to think about how history, mythology, and religious beliefs have evolved over time. Let's hear a passage directly from the Neo-Sumerian text translated by Stephen Langdon. Iana, the house of heaven, had not been created, the Apsu had not been made, Eridu had not been created. All the lands were sea, then Eridu or Eden was made. Esagil, the high heavens, were created. He made the Anunnaki gods, all of them, but the lands were marshes and reed beds. Then the Lord Marduk constructed a raft on the surface of the waters. He made earth and heaped it up. The Lord Marduk made a dam by the edge of the sea. He turned the reed beds into dry land. Earth he brought into being. He made the reed grow. He created the tree. There were palm groves and forests. He created the vegetation of the open country. He created canes, sedges, marshes, reeds, and canebrakes. He created animals, the creatures in the open country, the cow, the calf, the bull, the ewe, the lamb, the breeding ram. The wild sheep and the antelope were standing at his service. Aruru with him created the seed of mankind. He made the temple. He created the city. This passage beautifully captures the essence of the Neo-Sumerian creation myth and its striking parallels with Genesis. It's clear that the concept of creation wasn't isolated to one culture. Different civilizations across time shared similar ideas about how the world and life came into being. Both the Neo-Sumerian and biblical accounts of creation share a common structure. They start with a world of water and chaos, feature a powerful creator god who brings order, and describe the creation of the heavens, earth, and life. By comparing these texts, we can see how ancient civilizations viewed the act of creation and how these stories have influenced each other across time and cultures. It's fascinating to think about how these ancient stories have shaped the way we understand the world today. Whether in the ancient cities of Sumer or the biblical lands of Genesis, the themes of creation, order, and life resonate deeply. They remind us of our shared human quest to understand our origins and the forces that shaped the world we live in. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of ancient creation myths. If you found this discussion intriguing, be sure to subscribe to Eat the Fruit for more insights into history and mythology. See you next time.